All right, I'll let you take lead.
Okay, hey folks, welcome to today's Headspace and Timing podcast show. Normally I have some guests on here, maybe some clinical mental health counselors who work with veterans, maybe some veterans who have accessed clinical mental health counseling and talking about their situation. But obviously the national conversation right now is about what happened in Las Vegas this past Sunday night, which I think would have been October 1st, in which Stephen Paddock had opened fire on a defenseless crowd. And as I've been watching this over the past couple days, that we see these things, veterans see these things in a different light. And I have a good friend, a connection here, who happened to be on the strip that night. She was not at the concert, but we're going to have a conversation about what she experienced and our thoughts from veteran standpoint. So I would like to introduce Nicole Johnson. Nicole, thanks for coming on the show.
Dwayne, I'm happy to be here for sure. So yeah, let's get this thing going and get this stuff out there and talk about it.
Yeah, no, this is definitely something that I think we need to talk about, something that needs to be discussed. It's something that we're all talking about, but I believe that veterans have a unique perspective on this situation, having experienced things like this before. So before we get into that, I'd like you to introduce yourself a little bit, maybe talk a little bit about your military career as much as you're comfortable sharing, and we'll go from there.
Sure. Okay. Reader's Digest version, Nicole Johnson, like you said, former combat medic, joined the Army in 2009. Spent most of my career overseas. My last tour was with a combat engineer group, so learned a lot from these guys. Also learned a lot about trauma management, response, point of injury care, and things like that. So when I got out into 2012, I jumped into EMS thinking it would be a pretty easy, transition, and couldn't have been more wrong. Civilian EMS is God love them. It's not my gig. So trying to find kind of a new path, and ended up starting my own company, working with first responders, police departments, and civilians, doing what basically I learned how to do in the military, which is treating traumatic injuries at, the point of injury. Those first life-saving interventions, such as putting on tourniquets and, basic hemorrhage control techniques and things like that. So obviously for me, this is a big component. And really Sunday night hit it home and hit hard for me. Being there and seeing all that carnage and just not being able to do anything, and seeing so many other people around me not being able to do anything. And, it was one of those things where, we've got to do something. We've got a good start. These techniques and stuff, they've got the Stop the Bleed campaign initiative, but it's so small and not really known, and we've got to get it out there, just for things like this. So.
I hear you talk about the carnage. Obviously, my hair was standing on end the entire time we were paying attention to it all day Monday. But for someone who has experienced it, to call it carnage tells me exactly what it was. Now, you and I actually served in the same theater. I think that you deployed one cycle right after me, so I was in RC East 2009, 2010, and you were there 10 and 11, and I think you and I have talked about that RC East, maybe Kandahar, and maybe down in Helmand were probably three of the most kinetic deployment spots. And so if you're comfortable, compared to what you experienced in Afghanistan to what you saw Sunday night?
Honestly, it's apples and oranges, and it's really something that they're not comparable. They're completely different scenarios. Like we were talking about earlier, combat is it's a staged theater of operations. Both sides have their weapons, they have their mission and objectives. They know what they're supposed to do. this was a massacre. This was one man with heavy weapons, just raining down on unprepared, unarmed, and just civilians there to have a good time. And you could see it, and I was driving by basically as this was happening, and the footage on the cell phone of what's Aldine, is that who it was?
Yes.
Looking around. I mean, it was happening right there, and you saw when people started to realize what was happening. People started dropping, some out of fear, just hitting the dirt, trying to get low, and some, because they were being hit. And then it was just chaos. People were going one way and the other, and he had a suite, which basically looked off two different sides. So he had intersecting fields of fire. So he was basically just screwing with people, and there was no way for them to know where it was coming from and take appropriate cover. And so he had the tactical advantage on a bunch of people that had no way to respond, just trying to get out of the line of fire. So combat is chaos, but it's controlled chaos. What happened in Vegas was, I don't even know what to call it. I don't know.
I think that you're right. Words can't describe it, yet we're doing our best to try to make sense of it and provide that help. They say combat is a two-way rifle range. Whereas those of us in the military, we train on a one-way rifle range, but sort of a two-way shooting gallery. That wasn't this. This was just a one-way rifle range with innocent people on one end. And I get it. There is no comparable. Like you said, it is truly a massacre in the most literal sense of the word. So, tell me, before we got on the recording, you talked a little bit about what was happening and where you were at. I think you said you were there for a softball tournament or something. So, I mean, you were in Vegas for, S&Gs too, right? It was, this is not something that you were expecting. So talk me through sort of, where you were at, what you were doing on Sunday.
Okay, sure. And yeah, definitely wasn't expecting this. And that was part of my whole just anger with this entire situation, from the moment I realized what was happening to, even now, in my head, I'm going, why didn't I have my gun? Why wasn't I, ready to respond? Even though it's foolish, what am I going to do with a 9mm against, all of his entire arsenal? But, it's that thing in your head that just goes, oh, what if something had been different? What if I could have done something different? Yeah. But no, I was just there on business, / pleasure. Priest, my company, was sponsoring a team that was in a softball tournament, so we were going there to kind of cheer them on and have a presence there and just enjoy Vegas. And was just driving the strip, taking in the lights and stuff, and coming back. Was when it hit me, and I really just when hell broke loose, and traffic stopped. I mean, really very quickly. So I'm stuck right there in the middle of all this chaos, and people are starting to kind of leave the park area and just running through the streets. And I stopped one lady and was like, "Hey, what's going on?" She said, "Somebody's shooting. People are hit." And she took off again. So of course me, because I don't have any common sense, I get in my car and head towards it. Try to anyway, but I can't make my way there, and it's just traffic is just standing still. And by the time I do get close enough, they've already got it cordoned off, and they're just not letting people in the scene. People are still coming out, but obviously they have to at this point secure it as much as possible. By this time, the shooting was pretty well contained. He was still in the hotel and still shooting, but he had stopped shooting out into the streets. So they were doing all this triage and casualty assessment, and I'm standing there going, "I'm a medic, let me in," and just they didn't care, which I understand, but it was still so frustrating. So driving around trying to find a hole, like, I'm getting in here, y'all just don't know it yet. And I end up kind of in the Mandalay Bay AO, and was trying to kind of find my way in there, and made it down to the park garage, and I was listening to the scanner, and man, that was just a whole nother nightmare. Listening to these guys screaming and just trying to figure out what's going on and coordinate and listening to the body count just add up. You have civilians down, officers down, just one after the other. It's like, holy shit, this is happening. This is really happening, and I'm right here, and I've got to do something. So I was about to do something. I didn't know what. I didn't have a gun. I didn't have a bat. I didn't have anything. But I was going in, and luckily, 2 people with common sense showed up, and they stopped me. A couple of Las Vegas PD, I suppose, and so they turned me out. And at this point, I was just so overwhelmed and frustrated and angry. I was like, okay, I can't do anything here. They're not going to let me. So I went back to my hotel and made contact with security there and told them what was going on, and was trying to just get them ready. And other than that, I just kind of sat there and waited, and eventually the police department showed up at our hotel and locked it down, and nobody in or out. But, it was just an overwhelming response. It really was, I got to say. I got to give those guys props. But it was just it was a crazy situation, and I don't know. I'm angry that I couldn't do more, but at the same time, I'm glad that I was able to kind of step back and let them go do their job. It's just one of those tough situations,
That's and you're talking about just even from the very beginning, the typical response of a veteran, of someone who is trained. You have your medical skill, but you also have your soldier skill, I guess, to move towards something, to do something rather than run away. I was listening. Of course, we're all listening to the news and things like that, and heard yesterday about one of the guys who was there close to stage was saying that LVPD or an LEO was pointing them to safety, pointing them away from the shooter, and then turn around and ran towards it. And so that's something that isn't typical. It's against. I don't think it's common sense. I mean, I assume it's. Yeah.
No, definitely not common sense.
But it's
whatever it is, I'm thankful for it.
But it's common to us, right? It's common to veterans. It's common to what we're trying to do, what we want to do. I mean, obviously, I even recall when the Paris attacks had occurred last year, that one of the first thoughts that came in my mind is like, man, they're going to need a trauma counselor or something. And then I'm like, what am I going to do in Paris? I've got soldiers and veterans to take care of here. But there is that immediate response to go towards it. And then when that response is thwarted, we get frustrated. But another thing that I heard you say, and you said it there at the end, and you talked about it before, was the response by the law enforcement officers was like immediate. It was staggering. You said how quick they got there.
Oh, absolutely. Las Vegas isn't huge, so obviously, there's a lot of stuff there central, especially, on that part of the strip. But even that being said, within minutes, there were half a dozen to a dozen, response vehicles there. And then, the ambulances started just coming out of the woodworks. It was crazy to see. It was just like they were multiplying. I don't know. But, that aside, their response was fantastic. But the citizens that were actually there, I know you guys are hearing stories and seeing footage, but with my own eyes, seeing people grab people and get them out of the way, get them out of the hot zone, trying to get everybody together under different shelters and cover, seeing people load up casualties into the backs of trucks and vehicles and driving off. One of the ones that passed me, it was awful, and you're probably gonna have to delete this, but there were 5 or 6 bodies in the back of that truck, and it was just hauling ass down the strip towards a UMC, I guess. And I don't obviously know the status of any of those casualties, but it was just one of those speechless moments. Like, holy cow! People were acting, and they were stepping up and doing triage and casualty assessment and getting people out of there. And that's great. You can't teach people that. They've got to do that on their own. And they did what they needed to do. I just wish that they had been a little better trained and who knows what could have, been prevented, with more training and preparedness for this. But again, how do you train and how do you prepare for something like this? That's the old argument.
Yeah, no, I get you, and the response different than the prevention, and how do you prevent? That's a thing that I think has been ringing in my mind was the stories of people helping people, that 1,000 selfless acts, or 1,000 acts of humanity, 1,000 acts where we hear stories of people shielding each other, mothers shielding children, and husbands and shielding wives, and wives shielding their women and shielding their friends, and people reaching out and help, that somehow these thousands acts of humanity collectively are going to resound bigger than the one act of horror. That personally, perhaps maybe my hope is that the legacy is that we see what we can do under extreme duress, even in response of horror.
I have to believe that 110%. There's a lot of evil out there right now, and I've got to believe that the good still outweighs it. And just what we've seen in the last couple months with the hurricanes coming through, Harvey, and the devastation down in Houston and Florida and Puerto Rico, and those island chains out there, and now in Vegas, just the way the communities and the people are stepping up and helping one another, perfect strangers, offering the shirt off their back to the person beside them, not asking for anything in return. I mean, that's what we're supposed to be about, and I think that's what we've lost. And I hope that people can, see what's going on, and I really hope at some point it stops taking a tragedy to get people to come together and realize what we're all about. But that seems to be what does it. That's kind of sad to say, but I mean.
And you're right. It does, and not, I think you and I have talked quite a bit. I mean, this isn't about, waking up people, and this isn't, this isn't, whatever. Not a conspiracy thing. This is like literal. Yeah, no, I mean, but we've seen. We've seen what happens. Like I said, I've been watching this through the eyes of a combat veteran on one hand, and a clinical mental health counselor on the other, and understanding what the impact is and would have been. And I think that we, again, veterans, have the ability to step out and say, hey, we can help. Help us change things. Help us. Just listen to us. You and I talk about that, quite a bit. How do we get the word out? You said that in the days leading up to it, totally unbeknownst to you, you had been talking to staff of the hotel where you were at, and just saw. I mean, Vegas is. I've never been to Vegas. My wife and I have talked about it, but it's they talk about soft targets, and it's probably about the biggest and maybe even the softest. So talk a little bit about what you saw leading up to, as far as people prepared for some type of emergency. Well,
you hit the nail on the head. I mean, for what Vegas is supposed to be about, and for all of its, I don't know what to call it exactly, bolstering, it's very, very vulnerable. It's got a very soft underbelly. And I wasn't even doing it deliberately. Just walking into the hotel, I'm just looking for, exit points and things like that. I'm looking at security. I'm looking for first aid kits, AEDs, fire extinguishers, just anything like that. I'm trying to get a feel for the place, and I'm just not seeing it, and security walking around left a lot to be desired. And, no disrespect intended. I wouldn't want to do that job either, but, they weren't armed. They just kind of looked sloppy and complacent. And, just talking to the lady that I was, one of the staff ladies, it wasn't trying to sell them anything. It was just saying, hey, this is what I've noticed from an outside point of view as someone who does this pretty much for a living. and this is something that you guys might want to consider. And she was like, you need to go talk to the head of security or the director of training and tell them, because we say this stuff all the time, and they just don't listen to us. So I'd kind of put it on my agenda. I was going to do it the day before I left. Flew out, go talk to them and say, hey, this is what I've seen. Talk to your staff. Just kind of throw it out there, and didn't really think anything else of it. And then this happened, and it's just like, I don't even know how to process that. It's one of those things, just like, okay, universe, I get you trying to tell me something maybe, but big neon sign. But even going back in there the night that it happened, trying to talk to them, they had no idea what to do, and they weren't ready to admit it either. They basically just kind of dismissed me, and we got it, and I'm going, no, you don't got it. You far from got it. But again, like I said earlier, you can't make people do this kind of stuff. They have to, want to train and get the knowledge and stuff. But I don't know. It was weird. It was really weird. Just kind of surreal being there, for one, and then having that happen on top of, the previous conversation. But just I don't know. That's been my mantra since this whole thing started. Just, I don't know. I got nothing else.
Well, and I think
it's a rough weekend.
And even as we were talking even before this, is struggling to find the words. I think I called it infuriating, and you said it was beyond infuriating. What word what word is more helpless than helpless, and what word is more angry than rage? This is the response. Your immediate physical response to your urge to want to save lives, and your urge to want to get into the action, and then of course my urge to want to help people make sense of this when it gets frustrating.
I think your job is much harder than mine. I do not envy the mental health professionals, especially in the coming days. Like we were talking about earlier, I was standing there, talking to security as all this was unfolding, trying to let them know what was going on. And a mother and her daughter come up, and the daughter is just hysterical and crying, and the mother is just incensed. And she's like, you need to lock this place down. There is a shooting. And I assume the girl was at the concert and had made it out. But, I could see it on her face. It was shock and fear, and her whole world just got flipped upside down. For the most part, people here in this country live in a bubble. They are safe, they are protected, and they don't feel that sense of danger and need to be proactive and ready and things like that. But when it hits really hard, and I think people are seeing that. And I think you guys, as mental health professionals, are going to have your work cut out for you in the coming days.
And I agree. This was. We trained for it, even if we only knew about combat in a theoretical sense. It's what we signed up for. My career, split between peacetime Army and then combat, and all of my deployments, the majority of my deployments were on the back end, but combat was at least theoretical, and we understood it, and we had our minds set in a certain way that once we step off this plane, there's a likelihood, and the deeper into the mountains we got, the greater the likelihood. And so we had our minds set. The people that were going to that concert didn't have their minds set to be able to combat against that thing, or to really even sort of process that, and so they were at an extreme disadvantage, where Paddock had all of the disadvantages, or had all the advantages.
Absolutely.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, I know what you meant. And that goes. That's on a lot of different levels. Coming from a tactical point of view, they were very disadvantaged, and coming from a mental health point of view, they've been disadvantaged for quite a while. So we have a lot of vulnerabilities in places we don't even realize. So we definitely need to start thinking about bolstering our defenses, getting people trained physically and mentally for bad shit, just because it's happening, and we need to stop pretending like it's not. You know, I don't know. I guess just I've been just harping on this for so long, because I know, and you know, that bad things happen and can happen anywhere, and this isn't just active shooter stuff, and it's anything but the active shooter stuff. It's here, it's happening, and it's time to start thinking seriously about how we're going to approach readiness and afterwards response, from your point of view as a mental health person. So it's I don't know, it's a lot that we need to change for sure. I just don't even know where to start.
I mean, and obviously, this kind of thing going back to Whitman and the tower in the 60s or things like that, and of course the technology, the news. I mean, it just I found myself trying to find more information, and it's just simply not there. It's just information moves at the pace that it moves, but we all want to hear more, and we get frustrated. And so I think there's going to be a huge wave of conversation around vicarious trauma and people thinking like that. Like I said, I was some friends of mine, my fellow co-host Jeff Adamek and I, we were just talking about caliber and type, and veterans were having different conversations yesterday than those who had never served because of our experience. I imagine yours was the same situation. You were having different conversations yesterday from an emergency response point of view.
Yeah. I have I don't know if it's fortune or misfortune of knowing both sides of, this particular coin. I know, I'm not an SME by any means, but I know, cavitation and, how the effects of different rounds impact the body and things like that. And I also know the medical side of the exact same thing. Okay, cavitation, this round's bouncing around, it's going to go through, it's just going to shatter into a million pieces and just rip shit to shreds. That's knowing those things helped me do my job better. But yeah, I did find myself definitely, going through these things in my head. And even as I was saying, man, I wish I had my gun, I don't have my gun. I have a 9mm that I carry with me. And, this guy was probably several hundred yards away. There wasn't anything I could do, but it was just that thought process of, okay, get to the threat, eliminate the threat, fire superiority. Just all these things are going through my head, and I couldn't do a freaking one of them. I'm standing there with a tourniquet in my hand looking like an idiot going, what do I do? It's just, readiness is only a part of it. But, yeah, it was definitely interesting. And some of the conversations afterward, but I've had to kind of watch where I'm saying these things at. Like, I look around and I realize I'm in public among civilians, people that probably don't understand me or, the thought process of, veterans and people that are in this kind of work. And you got to be careful, because sometimes you can really get yourself in some awkward situations.
No, I recognize that. My wife, I was going to a doctor's appointment with my wife yesterday, and I was wanting to turn on the news in the waiting room, and I I was going to go up and ask, hey, can we watch the news? And I looked around, and there were like kids in there and stuff like that. And yes, we like I've often said, those who have served are looking through a different filter than those who haven't served. We have a level of awareness that it just through experience and through training to be able to see that.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not sure if it's a blessing or a curse sometimes. I guess that, ignorance really is bliss in certain circumstances.
I think it might be until the point where, it's, I guess I've always said, I'm that friend that you don't need or don't want until you need me, until you want me. And I'm sure yours is the same situation try to break glass in case of emergency, but definitely it's the emergency here.
Basically.
I think that, and there from what I've seen, and I could give a crap less about the reasons, although reasons do help us try to make sense of it, but the reasons are not the whatever, why he did it doesn't matter as much to me. The fact that he did do it, and we have to respond to what the situation is. But you were saying earlier that there was no response to this. There's no way. This is, as far as we can tell on the outside, like you said, Monday morning quarterbacking, that the incident doesn't appear to be preventable.
I don't want to say that with any concrete finality, because to a degree we can prevent things like this. I mean, obviously you can't treat every situation the same. We're not going to treat a visit by the president the same as a concert. The security protocols are going to be different. Obviously the resources are going to be different. So to a degree, yeah, we can. They had cops there, on the scene, on the ground right there. But there weren't snipers in place. There weren't measures of egress or any kind of plan to get people out. But
so, and definitely, you're talking about safety response or things like that. Of course, we hear often, especially in recent years, about security measures that are taken at the large scale events like the World Series or the Super Bowl or stuff like that. Very high profile events. But this was just, there's concerts on the Strip every week, I imagine, or we know there's concerts, and this is sort of the everyday thing. And so you're talking about preventing, a preventive stance, or a ready stance in the preventive sense, where maybe it might not have been so much of a massacre had those things been in place. But how would you propose? I mean, this is the Nicole Johnson has a blank check and $50 million to prepare the everyday citizen to respond to emergencies like this?
Putting me on the spot, aren't you? Man, Dwayne, I really wish I had just a blanket answer to solve that problem. If I did, hell, I'd be a millionaire. But I don't. I'm sure there's someone a lot smarter than me out there that's probably already figured this out. But again, we can, to a degree, prevent these things, with awareness training and, like I said, the Stop the Bleed campaign and things like that. But we can't just have everybody live in fear all the time. And hey, something bad's going to happen. Always be watching over your shoulder. We can put in place safety features, metal detectors, have, bag searches at every single venue. The resources spent on that would be astronomical. And, who's to say that it's going to, prevent anything anyway? At what point does it become a violation of people's rights and things like that? Same thing with flying. I mean, it's just become a miserable, unpleasant process. And how much good does it really do? So I think where we've really got to focus is not prevention, but readiness to respond. That's really the only thing we can do, and just mitigate the damage when it happens. That's where I'm at on this. And again, I don't have an answer for how to do that at a mass level, but there's got to be, some way to get everybody on the same sheet of music and, put this out there as much as possible. I don't know how. No, subliminal messaging, maybe.
I hear you about the, not wanting everybody to live in fear. I want my kids to go to school and feel as though they're going to learn things and not be worried about, an active shooter in the school and things like that. That was a lot of the reasons why, especially when I first started deploying, my kids were, in grade school, and we used to say, I'm going over there to make sure that the bad guys stay over there versus come over here kind of thing. And that's how my wife and I gave the message. But and so there's that balance of trying to be able to say, hey, is there, awareness versus over preparedness? In the coming days, I imagine I'm going to have a lot of conversations with my veterans who are going to say, see everything that I've been, preparing for, and this is exactly the kind of thing. And to say, we know neither the day nor the time. And so figuring, I like how you said readiness versus prevention. This is how do we increase readiness or awareness? I listen, you train beyond just, Red Cross first aid, right? The CPR, the stop the bleeding and things like that. But do you think that kind of thing is necessary, giving people more awareness of having a level of readiness, EDC kits, medic kits in the cars, things like that?
Oh, absolutely. And that's not even me, trying to promote any kind of business or anything like that. That's just common sense. Have a little bit of training, have some, knowledge under your belt and confidence in how to use that knowledge and apply it at the right time, and have the equipment that you need to do it. I mean, why not? I don't, if someone could give me a really good response to why not, I'll shut up. But until then, there's no reason, answer that you can give me that makes sense for not having this basic training. A lot of these stop the bleed classes that are going on right now are free. They're coming in and they're doing this stuff for free. So why not go in and take advantage of that? And, you may not ever need it. I hope that the people that I train never have to use this stuff. But if they do, it can save lives. It can save their lives. It can save the lives of people around them. And it's just one of those things where, I don't understand why you wouldn't take the time to do it if you knew that it could make a difference.
I think back to what you were
that's where
talking
I'm at on that.
Well, yeah, absolutely. That you were saying earlier, the will is there, that people were saving people, that people were were staying maybe when the urge was to flee, and people were helping when the urge was to abandon. And how much more effective could it have been had they had a level of training and just the resources that were there.
Oh yeah. And again, I can't say because I didn't see the injuries. I didn't, put hands on anybody. But it's shown throughout every major event, every war. Lives are lost because of very grievous injuries that kill quickly. And, there's basic things that people can do with very minimal training and skill, that can stop that. And I have to imagine that some of the people that lost their lives last night probably lost them unnecessarily. And, that burns me up on a lot of levels. So I'm trying not to dwell on it too much, but, I just, in my mind, I can't help but think, man, how many people could have been saved if the situation had been different, if the supplies on hand had been different, if the officers and the people there, on the scene had the training and the equipment they need, maybe a medical response bag in the trunk of their, patrol cars or something, who knows? But, I can't discount, the importance of having the right tools at the right time. It saves lives. It does. So.
And
I don't know.
No, but the immediate response, I think you're right on it. And the idea, of course, all the lives, and I know this isn't what you meant, but all the lives were unnecessarily lost because of
Oh yeah,
and
yeah.
not
Absolutely. That goes without saying.
Judgment on I'm not going to sit here and I've heard a lot of people heaping anger and spit on this guy. I mean, he did what he did, and a monstrous act was a monstrous act. But something else that I was listening to yesterday that actually, to be honest, made me think of you because you're my resident doc. And I think that you and I were going to have this conversation in the coming days anyway, not knowing at that point that you had been there. Was I was listening to one of the doctors on, whatever it was, one of the networks, and he was talking about how one of the things that we have learned through Iraq and Afghanistan was the golden hour, the golden minutes, and things like that. Was a lot of times people will say, well, why are we there? Why it's 17 years going on, this war and things like that. But the tactics and techniques that we learned in Iraq and Afghanistan, especially when it comes to life-saving techniques, were definitely applied, I think, to what happened on Sunday. Do you agree?
Absolutely. Even as far back as the Boston event, the event in Dallas last year, you're learning so much. It's sad as I said, we learn from others and understand some of our exposed. Some great things started after.
Hey, Nicole, I'm sorry, I'm not hearing you. Right after I asked that question, you kind of went out.
How's that? Working with no signal here.
Can you hear me?
Can you hear me now? Yeah, I can hear you. I think I'm the one that's having an issue.
Yeah, I can hear you a little bit. It was going out a little earlier, but can you try to pick it up again?
Okay.
Right? Yep, that sounds good.
Okay, there we go. I'll put some tempo on my bed. It's actually good now.
So you can pick it up right after I was talking about what we learned as far as battlefield triage and after the golden hour.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So, man, I had a good train of thought. You threw me off. Unfortunately, to pick this back up, TC3, which is Tactical Combat Casualty Care, which is what you're teaching and training people on and using in the military now, and even bringing it to the civilian side, we had to learn from a lot of mistakes, a lot of deaths and lives lost in, the earlier conflicts. And after the Vietnam War, a bunch of big wags generals got into this think tank and said, guys, we have a problem and we need to fix it, but we're dying from simple wounds. And from that formed, the Committee of Tactical Combat Casualty Care and, all these different methods of life-saving interventions. And, it's still in, it's ever evolving. That's what's so cool about trauma medicine. But it's slowly coming to the civilian side, and that's what's been my biggest gripe thus far is just the way the policy and process moves, getting civilians trained in this stuff. It's like pulling teeth. Going to police departments, forget about it. It's not in the budget. They don't want to hear about it. They don't need that stuff. It's infuriating from my perspective because I see what's going on and I see these injuries and I'm going, this is something that I can easily train your department to work with and fix and know what to do. So my frustration just lies in seeing what's going on here and seeing the lack of readiness and response. So that's where I'm focusing right now. So I know my direction is a little bit different than yours, but it's I don't know. That's crazy.
No, I think it's some really important stuff, and I think that I know that I really appreciate your willingness, as quick as this was, as recent as this is, to kind of come on and talk about what you experienced and just seeing it from a combat veteran perspective. It's the thing that's been rattling around in my head for the last 48 hours, and I know that I'm not the only one from the other veterans I've had conversations with. So I appreciate you coming on and sharing your insight.
No, thanks for having me. I apologize. It was kind of all over the place. It's been a long couple of days. I'm tired of not understand we lost the tournament. So and I just been a rough weekend, but I'm hoping that I can kind of pick up from this. And I hate to say it, but this is something that you said earlier. that's the world we live in. Gotta adapt.
Now I know that this is not your intent, or this isn't why you came on the show with me today, but you know some stuff, Nicole, and so I want you to be able to get your information out there, Priest Tactical, where people can find you if they want to continue this conversation and maybe talk about some of your ideas about how to improve readiness.
Sure. Thank you for the shout out. Definitely didn't come with that intent. Got good information there, and this is my passion. Whether I get paid for it or not, either way, I'm happy. But if anybody wants to look into training, they can find me at the website, priesttactical.com, or on Facebook, also Priest Tactical Solutions. We have different methods of contact me through either email list, position on the web, but we're located in Dallas currently. But we would go anywhere. This is our basic operations. We're looking to build a PRS facility here and start training, the people here in the hometown and our communities. From there, branch out. But I think it starts at home, so that's where I'm at.
Well, I really appreciate it, and there's a balance, I think, between us wanting to get the word out and then taking care of ourselves, and I just hope in the next coming days that you take care of yourself and talk to who you need to talk to, and I'll take care of myself so I can talk to who I need to talk to, and then that way we can each take care of the people that we care about.
Absolutely. Readiness isn't just an aspect of being physically ready, but mentally as well. You've got to be mentally tough and really ready to respond and react, and then later process and move on from things like this. So you've got your working out here as well in a couple different arenas. So you do the same as well. You give advice to me all the time. I'm going to give it to you. You take your own advice.
Take my own advice.
So, take your own advice.
Drink water and change my socks, right, Doc?
Yep, that's it.
All right. Well, I appreciate it, and folks. So that is today's episode. Somber, heavy, important, and I can't thank you enough for listening, for caring enough to want to hear about what was happening, and I look forward to talking to you next week. Thanks.